Listen, I was watching this video. I was watching this video from I think it was from last year, and this has been on my plate for a long time. I just never really gotten around to talking about it. It was an interview between Rob Schneider and Glenn Beck. So Glenn Beck, he was doing his podcast, and he had Rob Schneider, the actor and comedian, on. The guy, you can do it guy from The Water Boy, and from a whole bunch of other Adam Sandler's movies. And he did a couple of movies of his own too. He was Deuce Bigelow. Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo. Anyhow, he was doing the Glenn Beck show, and they were talking about the way the world is, and Rob Schneider's quite. Don't think conservative is the right word. I'm really struggling with that, but that's a whole other talk. But Rob Schneider, he's one of those, we want to get back to the way America was when America was great. He's a Make America Great Again guy. And these two were talking about growing up. They were talking about growing up in the 60s and the 70s and what life was like and how wonderful it was and how they want to get back to that time. They want to get back to that place. And as I'm listening to them, I'm not that guy at all. Like sentimentality, I understand sentiment, but I'm not that. I'm not like that. And so whenever I hear people speaking like this, that they want to get back to those days, I know they don't mean they want to turn the clock back. I know they don't mean that, because we have so much more today than we did then. Like, we don't want to turn the clock back and miss out on all the medical advances we've had. Of course not, right? We don't want to turn the clock back and miss out on the cars and the technology we have. No, of course not. They want to turn the clock back. They want to feel the way they used to feel. That's what it boils down to. They want to feel the way they felt when they were growing up. They want to feel the way they felt when they were going to school, when they were playing with their friends. That's what these guys were talking about. They're talking about taking their bikes around their dads worked all the time and their moms were at home, and they could bike around the neighborhood and their friends would be there and they wouldn't have to come home till 9 or 10 o'clock. And mom would start yelling, get home now, or whatever the case might be. I miss those days. I had those kinds of days. I had those kinds of friends. I had friends in my own town growing up, and my cousins who lived about an hour and a half away. I used to love going to their house because they had so many great friends as well. And that's how we did. We were roving children, right? You get on your bike at 8 o'clock in the morning and you were gone. Maybe you'd come home for lunch if you thought about it. Maybe you'd come home for supper if you thought about it. But generally speaking, somebody else's parents would feed you, so it was all okay. But none of it is about actually turning back the clock. It's about the feels. And so when they bump into something that's progressive, like not technology, because we would never speak that way about technology, and not when it comes to money, and because we would never speak that way about wealth and money. No, that's not what they want to go back to. They want to go back to the way it feels. And when they bump into things like the woke culture, right? Liberalism, progressive ideals, when they bump into that stuff, it bothers them, because those equality, justice, diversity, equity, equality, diversity, equity. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Those things are such a threat because they see it as a threat, because they're seeing those things as the reason they don't feel the way they used to feel. But the truth is, they don't feel the way they used to feel because they're adults. The world has changed. They have changed. They've grown up. When I was 8 years old, I'd love to feel like an 8-year-old again. But what do I do with all my responsibilities? What do I do with my family, with my kids? I can't wake up on Monday morning and take my bike around my neighborhood and, not come home until 10 o'clock at night. I have a job. I have bills to pay. I have children to look after. I have things to do around the house. I have chores to take care of, in partnership with my wife. We have a household to run. Life catches up with us. These guys, they want to feel that way. They don't feel that way. They can't possibly feel that way. And so I think they're looking for an enemy to blame. So it must be diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the enemy. That's the villain. If we got rid of diversity, equity, inclusion, I would be able to feel this way. Well, it's women having careers. That's why I don't feel the way that if we had women staying at home, I'd be able to feel this way. It's all this social justice nonsense. If we got rid of all the social justice stuff, I'd be able to feel that way. If we got rid of the liberals, if we got rid of the taxes, if we got rid of this, if we got rid of that. No, man. You're never going back. We don't have the opportunity to go back because we're not kids anymore. Right? Our lives have changed. Over time, our lives have changed. I think it's last night, we had some friends over for supper, some people from the church, and they're just wonderful people. But we were talking about Star Wars. I love talking about Star Wars. I love Star Wars. But that wasn't the Star Wars these guys were talking about. So we had these teenagers, the kids of our friends, and they were talking about their favorite Star Wars being Phantom Menace. What? How could it possibly be Phantom Menace? Did you not see any others? How could Phantom Menace be your favorite? No, we love Phantom Menace. I grew up with Star Wars, right? Luke Skywalker, Star Wars. Han Solo, Star Wars. 1978, Star Wars. That was Star Wars. Phantom Menace fell flat. Well, why? Because seeing it, I didn't feel the way I did when I watched Star Wars for the first time. I didn't feel the way that I did when I watched The Empire Strikes Back for the first time. I didn't feel the way I did when I watched Return of the Jedi. I didn't feel the way that I did when I watched the Star Wars Christmas special that everybody hates, but as a kid, I was glued to the television because it made me feel a certain way. Phantom Menace, I didn't feel that way. It wasn't Phantom Menace's fault, though. I grew up. I wasn't seeing it through the eyes of a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old. I was seeing it through the eyes of a 30-year-old. Can't go back. And I mean, I'd love to be able to feel that way. I would love to be able to, I remember those days biking around with my cousins. I remember those days pool hopping. I remember those days, playing Atari. I remember those days. I'd love to go back to those days. Wouldn't you love to go back to those days? Yes, let's go back to those days. But those days are behind me. And it's nobody's fault. I don't have to blame some social movement. It's not their fault. I've grown. I've gotten older. I've got scars and experiences that have shaped my view of the world, my perception of what's going on around me. Kara says, not everyone had that childhood either because of being different or suffering trauma, abuse, social class. Yeah, as we progress, we try to include more people. They want to go back thinking of themselves. It is a very, that kind of thinking is very selfish. And when we're reminiscing on the past, I just want to go back. I just want to go back. I just want to go back. Many people don't. Right? The past we might long for, the heaven we might long for was somebody else's hell. And so, trying to change the rules to make that somehow, naively make that possible would mean, well, we get back to the heaven, but others are forced to relive their hell. I feel, again, I think about that interview, watching those two guys talk about it and reminisce, and just, I feel bad for them. I feel bad for them because what it is they're longing for, they are never going to have. And these people are people of means. They have a ridiculous amount of money, but they're never going to have. They're never going to be able to return to that time and feel that way again. But that's not why I'm sad. I'm sad because I'm sad for them. I'm sad for them because now they're tilting at windmills. They're charging at windmills. They're seeing, they're imagining that these windmills they're facing are dragons, and they're not. They're creating enemies where there's no enemy to be found. Villains when there are no villains to be found. Watching that interview, thinking about that interview now, I feel sad for them. Amen.